The New York State Bar, as of yesterday, the New York State Bar, as of yesterday, Dr. Mary Beth Morrissey, just Mary Beth Morrissey, who was the chair of the New York State Bar's health policy section, or the health section, and the State Bar itself passed a resolution to make it mandatory for all New Yorkers to receive the COVID-19 vaccination once it becomes available. Listen carefully. As of yesterday, the New York State Bar has passed a resolution while everyone was celebrating. This is why I told everyone, be wise while you're celebrating. Just be wise and pay attention to what's going on, because things are about to get very heavy. The New York State Bar, and particularly in the health section of the New York State Bar, passed a resolution to make the COVID-19 vaccination mandatory for everyone in New York, men, women, and children, once a vaccine becomes available. They specified in the resolution, they made it very clear. This is the other area that I was telling everyone about. They said, even if the person refuses on the basis of their religion, on the basis of their philosophical belief, or on the basis of their personal belief, whether if you can refuse it based on your medical belief or not, or your medical circumstance or not, that may be able to be worked through, possibly. But at the same time, this is exactly what we were telling people. This is exactly what we've been telling everyone. And the reason why I'm making this very clear and making it known up front is because if New York passed that, California absolutely is going to pass that. They're like twin cities when it comes to certain policies, especially when it comes to medicine in certain departments. Vaccines, if New York passed it, California absolutely will do the same. And the likelihood of it sweeping across the country is going to be very high. So they are going to say to you that even if you say it is against your religious belief, meaning God don't matter to them, they're going to say, and this is all over the New York Times, New York Post, all over the New York mainstream media as well. So if anyone wants sources, there you go. But for those who have been studying this for a very long time, including the doctors, including the lawyers, including the biochemists, including the virologists, epidemiologists, anyone who's been working in this area for a long time, I myself, as an independent researcher, have been working in this area for about the last 5 years. We know what we're talking about. It's obvious. It's blatant. There is no hiding it. It's not something that is a secret. It's not a conspiracy theory. This is blatant, documented fact. You're going to have to conscientiously object. Now, are there any dangers to objecting? Yes, there are many. The possibility that they will take away your children is one. This is something that I personally had to experience with a number of parents that I've worked with when I was giving them consultations regarding certain things, paperwork, information, documentation, etc. There have been parents who were threatened to have their children taken away if they didn't vaccinate them. And the doctors were saying to the parents that we're going to take your children away on the basis of medical neglect. This is the slick way of them trying to take away your children. They're going to say you're neglecting them medically because you refuse to give them a concoction of chemicals that is questionable, that the United States government itself states are in no doses in its combination safe. Period. Number two, they will say that you will be threatened to have your job taken away. You will be threatened with your job or with your employment. You can possibly be threatened with travel, as far as you being able to travel to certain areas, especially when it comes to going in and out of the country. That is a possibility. There are a number of things that they can threaten you with, because there are a number of things that people have already been threatened with, been faced with. These are things that have already happened. So as of yesterday, again, for anyone who's listening, the New York State Bar, in its medical area or medical section, passed a resolution to make COVID-19 vaccinations mandatory once they become available to all New Yorkers, and you will not be able to refuse it on the basis of your religious belief, on the basis of your philosophical belief, on the basis of your personal belief. But as far as medical, if you have something dealing with your body medically, you may be able to get around it. I'm not sure. I'm still researching the documentation, and it hasn't mentioned, anything medically, but that will be the only area that I would say you'd be able to kind of get around it. But even then, you can't tell a person that on the basis of their religious belief that doesn't work. That's not good enough. What they're telling you is God does not matter. And the reason why they are able to do this is because once something is declared a pandemic, then it in some way, what they're trying to make it do, cancels out the 50 state constitutions, and it only goes according to the federal government, which supersedes the authority. This is the way that they're pushing to make this happen. So yes, of course, people who want to go into it biblically, it talks about it biblically. It talks about it in every holy book. It talks about it when it comes to using the needle or pricking the brain of the child, which is what we're taught was a way for them to take away the children, was to feed the child to a wild beast, which is referring to a tyrannical system or government, and to prick the brain of the child. And if you inject a child younger than age of 2 or younger than the age of 3 or 2, prior to the blood-brain barrier being developed, that chemical that you inject bypasses the digestive system, which is where the majority of your immunization comes from, is in the gut. It bypasses the digestion, and it goes directly through an injecting process into the blood-brain barrier, past the blood-brain barrier, and therefore it affects or pricks the brain. And then, of course, because these chemicals hit the brain, it creates all of these different debilitating neurological disorders. One of the most famously talked about would be autism, or the autism spectrum disorder, which I know too many families of children who have autism, where they said their children were speaking, they were talking, they were jumping around, they were responding to their name, all of these different things. They were counting and singing and dancing, perfectly normal child, until after they got vaccinated. Once they were vaccinated, they were not responding to their name. Many of them couldn't stand up straight. They automatically started to bang their head. They would have high-pitched screams, lots of different things that happened directly following the vaccination. So when people say that vaccines have nothing to do with that, you don't know what you're talking about. And I recommend people just study it. But Minister Farrakhan said that we are not taking any of these vaccines because we cannot trust them. Plain and simple. We can't trust them. Vaccines are supposed to go through a safety testing regimen, which is longer than 5 years to fully test a vaccine. It takes more than 5 years. And they're rushing a vaccine out in less than 12 months. That's called a science experiment. And the Tuskegee experiment had less than 500 participants. This ain't nothing compared to what the Tuskegee experiment, or should I say, what the Tuskegee experiment was, and got nothing on this, because they're pushing to experiment on everyone throughout the country with a chemical concoction through a vial or vaccination that has not been fully tested. So we do not know what all of the effects will be. So just wanted to make that clear. That is what has come out in New York. Again, once it passed in New York, the likelihood that it passes in California or other states is very high. So just be ready to hear about that. Be ready to invoke your right to refuse. This is what it is. It is just what it is. So I just want to make sure we know and have the actual facts on what's going on. And I'll keep everyone updated. But that's the last update that I have on that. So make sure you take this information, spread it around, make sure everyone gets it. Anyone who you know, get it to the doctors, get it to the nurses, get it to the medical professionals. Most of them don't know what's going on with this because they just listen to what the National Institute of Health says. They listen to what the CDC says, etc. But they should look into it, because after taking the Hippocratic Oath, you know that you cannot force a person to receive any type of medical care. There are certain stipulations, but when it comes to a vaccination, you can't force them. After the passing of the 1986 National Childhood Vaccine Injury Act, a vaccine manufacturer can put literally anything in a vaccine, and they are not held with any liability. They cannot be sued because of that specific act that was passed, the National Childhood Vaccine Injury Act of 1986. Along with many other things. And according to the United States Supreme Court in 2011, they stated at the end of the case, that vaccines are unavoidably unsafe. 2011 United States Supreme Court. And if anyone wants more information as far as vaccines being connected to autism or vaccines being connected to anything negative, I recommend you look at a website that is connected to the Department of Health and Human Services. It is called the VAERS site. VAERS, Vaccine Adverse Events Reporting System. Vaccine Adverse Events Reporting System. If you do not know what that is, you know now. And anyone who has said the vaccines have nothing to do with any negative circumstance nor condition with the child, with the patient, with anyone, you might want to check out your government system, the Vaccine Adverse Events Reporting System, where they have reported tens of thousands of negative adverse effects. And all doctors and nurses are supposed to report to VAERS whenever they see something that happens with a patient after receiving a vaccination. If they see any negative adverse reactions or effects, they must report it to VAERS. And most of them know nothing about that. So make sure you look that up. And I think that's enough for now. I have a lot more information, but that's all for the update I'm going to give you now. Spread this around, let people know. It's nothing to be scared about, just to be informed, just to be aware that, yes, be wise when you're celebrating. Just be wise, because we still have a lot more, work to do. Peace.